Good morning. My daughter turned 18 months old yesterday. Thank you. Her dad is a proud Hindu and is brown. Her mom is white and Jewish. And in the aftermath of November's election, in the aftermath of Charlottesville, we worry about raising her in a society where one day she might become the other. I know this because in my own family's history, my dad was born in India under colonial rule. In my wife's family, she has refugees on her mom's side that escaped the Holocaust. We know what happens when nationalism and inward conversations where we start looking at one another as the other turns into hate and violent actions. So I got into this race because I believe in social justice, and I believe in fairness, and I believe in equity. I believe most people believe in those things. But if we elect people who hate government, and if we elect people who hate the institutions they seek to represent, then none of the values that I know that we all share will ever be embodied at any level of government. What's happening in Springfield as a result of Bruce Rauner's leadership is a travesty, but let's also call attention to the tactic that he's using. It's called divide and rule. It's what the British used against the Indians in India. It's how the Nazis started. You see, what Bruce Rauner is doing is he goes to poor white communities in central and southern Illinois, and he tells them that the reason they have trouble getting ahead or their schools aren't funded is because those people in Cook County and in Chicago get more than their fair share. And we know what he means when he says those people. It takes a different connotation depending on where he is and who he's speaking to. But he is turning our neighbors into the other. Our history is based on some of this. And what I'm telling you is Charlottesville is at the end of the line of a series of actions and policies that get us there. You know what's at the beginning of the line? Mandatory vetoes like SB 1, which pit poor white communities against poor black and brown communities. We know this from our own history over the last 2 generations. When jobs and industries were leaving the inner cities from poor black and brown communities, we knew what was going to happen. Poverty rates went up, and we had a crack and cocaine epidemic move in. And the response wasn't new jobs or more investment. The response was a racist war on drugs, and we broke up black and brown families. And now that those same kinds of jobs are leaving majority white communities in smaller towns, the same issues are coming up and poverty rates have gone up, people are struggling, and the drugs are different. It's not crack and cocaine, it's opiates. But today we call that opiate crisis a public health crisis. It's the same crisis that impacted black and brown communities 40 years ago. And I'm in this race to put a spotlight on this idea that if we divide ourselves based on where we live and what we do for a living and what we look like, nothing at the top ever changes. And this is a conversation and a set of politics that is by design. It's done when wealthy people tell us that we're all so different from one another and that we fight one another. And eventually we end up with Charlottesville. So the only way to bring people together is around an agenda that unites us. And that's why I am proud that yesterday we announced my running mate, Mayor Tyrone Coleman from Cairo. Mayor Coleman, if you could stand. It's time to put a spotlight on the injustices and the inequity in communities like Cairo, East St. Louis, Harvard, Galesburg, Rockford, Waukegan, and the south and west sides of Chicago. Because the problems that Mr. Coleman, Mayor Coleman, is dealing with are the same problems that you see in poor white communities. But if we don't organize people and transcend race and class and geography, nothing at the top ever changes. So I'm asking all of us as Democrats to recognize that we rise and fall together as a state. And that if Cairo falls or East St. Louis falls, we all fall. But if we lift Cairo up, we lift everybody. And it is important to put a spotlight on these issues. I don't want to be the other. I don't want my daughter to become the other. I don't want anyone else to become the other. But remember, Charlottesville is at the end of a line of policies that start by dividing people up. And that needs to come to an end. We are neighbors. We are Illinoisans, and we should act as such. Thank you.